Hey there, and welcome to Get Messy. I'm your host, Maddie, and today I'm interviewing actor, producer, and podcaster David Millstone. This conversation lit me up in the most unexpected ways. David is such a joy, and I thoroughly enjoyed his curiosity, his candidness, and his diverse career journey. From journalism and philosophy to acting and producing films, David shares how a painful divorce led him back to acting later in life. We chat about the challenges of re entering the industry, his pivot to producing due to the struggles of sustaining an acting career at the level he was desiring, and he shares his insights for what it really takes to produce a film from the ground up. We really dive into the nitty gritty of the business side of the film industry, and I found it all totally fascinating. David also has a wonderful podcast called the Everyday Courage Podcast. So we touched on the concepts of courage, both in the context of personal growth, overcoming fear, finding strength, and what courage means in a broader societal landscape. David also gave some really profound insight that I think most creatives and actors will find really impactful about the persistence, perseverance, and honesty needed in pursuing a creative career. We also touched on the loneliness of building a creative career and explored if acting can be a vehicle to experience catharsis, which him and I had differing opinions on. And we also touched on how to balance focusing on your craft while building a business. Without further ado, please welcome the astute and charming David Millstone. David, I'm so excited to chat with you today. I gave a little intro to the guests before you got on, but for people who don't know who you are, can you give us a spark notes of who you are, what you do, any important snippets of your story to kind of kick us off?
Sure. Well, these days I'm an actor first, and then I've become in the last 5 years or so a producer and an executive producer on little films. I'm not sure all my partners would like me to call them little films or tell you the truth, but they're sub-$1 million budgets. So, call them little. So that's where I'm doing today. I was an actor exclusively for about a decade. I turned to producing because I wasn't getting enough out of it. I wasn't getting on TV enough, frankly. And before that, acting itself was a pivot from other careers. I had been in journalism for a little while, which I actually really love. At one point, I thought I was going to become a philosophy major. That would have, boom, bad idea for me. I'm not quite analytical enough for that. Anyway, I kind of bounced around a bit trying to find my way. And eventually, I found my way back to acting and then to the business side a little bit.
I can't wait to talk to you about all of that, especially the business side, because I think you don't hear that often of actors finding themselves into that business side. And I'm so curious, David, because on your website, it says that you came to acting later in life, like to actually professionally pursue that as a career. How did acting get its grip on you from all the different things you were doing, working at a newspaper or philosophy? And what was the catalyst to actually make you want to dive into this as a career?
Well, the instinct to act started early. So the very first production I was ever involved in was a one-person showing of Wiley and the Hairy Man when I was 7 or 8 years old in elementary school. So I had an instinct to jump out there, and to do something. And I held on to that instinct through high school and into my early years at college. I went to Emerson College initially as a theater major. Then, though, I had also already developed an interest in journalism. And Emerson, I ended up being editor in chief in my sophomore year of the newspaper and then of the yearbook. So I ended up pivoting away from acting for a really long time just because, well, it's a couple of things. It was a little bit of cowardice. Actually, I was kind of had people in my head telling me, I thought were saying to me one way or another, I wasn't good enough for it. In retrospect, I don't think that's what they're saying. But that's what I heard. So I went away to other things for a while. Newspaper writing, fiction writing was something I really wanted to do. Philosophy, I went to in my later 20s just to actually spackle in some holes in my liberal arts education. I had neglected some stuff while I was at Emerson because I got myself busy with the newspaper, and I wanted to make up for that. And then in my late 30s, I went through a painful divorce, and that actually catapulted me back. I almost didn't tell you about that, but I was like, yeah, I should. That catapulted me back into theater. And it was a kind of a rough re-entry, to tell you the truth. I lost a lot of confidence and gotten really neurotic. What doesn't kill you makes you a stranger.
1000%.
So by the time I got to theater, after I got divorced, that was really painful. I had bounced around, as I've been saying, And I realized, you know what? It's time for me to stick with something. So I was 42 years old and I had just gotten back into acting classes for the very first time in literally decades. And I was doing the work and I decided I was going to stick with this no matter what. I was time to stay with something. So that's what I've done. I'm 65 now, which I can't believe. That's weird. Very strange number. Very weird. But I've been chipping away at this either full bore or there've been weeks and months of procrastination. I could say, I was like, yeah, I'm an actor, but I really wasn't doing a lot. So, since 42. So
Thank you for sharing about the divorce, David, because I think, we can never connect the dots of our life story looking forward. We can only connect them looking back. And I think sometimes it is those moments that are shocking us to our core and kind of make us reevaluate everything about ourselves, where we thought we'd be at that point in time. And I'm in grad school right now, which I never thought I would go to grad school because I lifelong actor. And I was like, here we are. Like, this is another path that I'm going
are you
on.
in
And
it for theater, for acting?
no, I'm in it for clinical mental health counseling.
Yes, right. I did see that. It's
Yeah.
great. It's fantastic.
I'm absolutely loving it so far. And one of my buddies who is an actor did it a couple years before me. So he is now a resident therapist in California. And one of the things that he does, he has like a certification to, it's called like drama therapy, where it's like you are using some of the acts of acting or exercises of acting to help people find catharsis and specifically like painful things like a divorce, or if they're going through a challenge with their marriage, or you're using role play, or you're using again different things that we do as actors or that you would be seen in an acting class in a group therapy session or in a therapy session. And I think I'm so excited to learn about that because I've always from a very young age found that acting has been such a cathartic experience. And whenever I'm not doing it as much, I emotionally feel stunted. And I'm like, oh, it's probably because I've not been expressing myself in the way that I'm able to when I'm acting and exploring with other creatives. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And I think it makes sense to me, even from what I'm learning in clinical mental health counseling, that through you kind of just showing up and doing theater again, it provided that catharsis you were maybe looking for. And then, like, on this whole journey that you've been on since you were 42.
I'm not sure I describe it as catharsis because
Yeah.
for me, I describe it more like a long burrowing in. It's iterative. The experience is iterative. So I feel like what I'm really doing as an actor is exploring different aspects of myself. I've gotten turned on in the last few years to relational psychoanalysis. Philip Bromberg is the guy who wrote a lot of that. Body Keeps Score is great. It's fantastic. It's a popularization a little bit of work by people like Bromberg. And they really talk about the self not as a singular self, but as a collection of selves that are defined by their role in helping us survive in the world. So the self that is really maybe social and is here with you is a bit different than the one that's just with my wife, when she and I hang out, or I am by myself, or when I'm scuba diving, I go into something else. And so acting it gives me a chance to explore self states. Actually, that's the phrase that I would use. Explore self states that otherwise I wouldn't think to consciously try to explore. So I love it for that.
I relate so deeply, David. And I think something my therapist has talked to me about when I've been in therapy is like parts work, which I'm going to look up Bromberg. I'm not familiar with him, but it sounds fascinating where it's like the different selves, different parts of who you are, and how, like you said, all of those parts, even if some of them are very annoying, are fighting for our survival and our safety all the time. And so, there was a moment I was talking about my anxiety and I was like, oh, I just wish I didn't feel anxious about XYZ. And she's like, yeah, and that part of you is also probably contributing to like some of your success or some of XYZ. And, so kind of reframing again how those different parts are always trying to keep us safe, trying to help us thrive.
Yeah, I would really love it if people, were able to think of their work as an ongoing conversation and, not as look at a monologue. It's not a monologue. It's part of a dialogue, and it's a dialogue with scene partner, audience, self, right? And speaking for myself, I actually like to, theoretically throw out the idea of myself and just stick with the idea of conversation, with experience, with existence, and try to always be like learning something rather than setting out to make a statement.
with what you're doing. And I think that perspective, David, if more people had it, I think because you've obviously been doing this a long time. And
Yeah, I had to get old. I had to get old to get so wise.
because I think some people, it's like, especially if they're in the trenches of the career side of it, I feel like there's always that delicate balance of like craft versus the business. Like, and it is very difficult at times where I think some people hide from the strategy they need to implement to actually make this a career path and go so deep into the craft, or vice versa. Like they're too focused on like the business elements and they're kind of neglecting their craft, so to speak. Sometimes I feel like people develop a bitterness of like, I'm not where I want to be yet. This is way harder than I thought it was going to be. There's multiple different reasons why people might have it. And so then when they take that into their performance or into their class, like, yes, they're here in the motion of acting or in the motion of trying to get better, but it's like losing, like you said, that conversation with themselves. Like there's no curiosity or exploring anymore.
Yeah, but I think that, our work is not static. And I had a conversation with Michelle Simone Miller on our podcast recently that was kind of along these tracks a little bit. And she reminded Stefan Dweck, my podcast host, and I, that we're allowed to change our minds about what we want to do and what our boundaries and principles are. But also, we're allowed to change and we're allowed to grow. So we don't have to get it all at once. In fact, that's what I would say to younger actors often. Don't worry about getting it all at once. There is a moment for just working on craft and not working on your acting craft and just getting experience and not being worried about the business. Absolutely. And then, there's a moment for stepping out into colder waters and a business of trying to come up with a strategy, of becoming more realistic, maybe. And that's another moment. So it's a long road.
It is a long road. And as you're kind of thinking about the path that you've been on, David, both the professional business side of things and the craft side, what surprised you the most about being a professional creative in the entertainment industry?
Yeah, I was surprised how lonely it is. Oftentimes, I think one of the reasons I came back to theater, film, TV from journalism and writing. Well, journalism is not lonely. Journalism, you actually get to talk to a lot of people. But fiction writing, I did find to be lonely, and I've never been ready to really sit with myself. I was never comfortable enough with myself enough to do that alone in a room and not feel like I was missing something. So I would turn to theater wanting to make friends and colleagues. And, you know, I was neurotic for a really long time, so that made it harder. But also, what made it harder was realizing that a lot of my time as an actor was going to be at home doing my homework, really spending time with scripts by myself and self motivating to get myself in a workshop or, no one's holding my hand. Nobody's interested in my success. Only I am.
It's wild that you bring that up too, David, because especially in the last decade or so, I've done a lot of voiceover. And the cool part about the way my agency was run is we would all go into the agency to record all of our auditions there. So sometimes 5 days a week, you're seeing all these people who become your friends. And the best part about it too is, you'd be able to go in, literally just perform and worry about your performance and leave the booth and someone's editing it for you. They're choosing the takes. Like you're out gabbing with your friends, coming back in. Like it was so flexible and free. Cue COVID happening. And now we're all in like boxes in our house doing this, right? Like our studios, closets, whatever we have. And that is something I mean, the only time I find community is if I'm seeking it out, like going to a workshop or doing these podcasts with other creatives and getting to have that conversation. Cause what used to have so much community is like, I don't see anybody. I don't even see people's faces when I'm working.
Well,
with
that's another
them.
argument for doing the business side. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I'm in constant touch with my partners in a peer-to-peer way. Not only as actors are we out there on our own so much, self-taping and self-motivating, but we are also in this terrible position of needing to be obsequious to people from whom we want jobs. So we're always trying to ingratiate ourselves. And I don't know about you, but that ends up really eating away at me. And it ends up making me second guess my work in unhealthy ways. There are healthy ways to second guess, but in unhealthy ways. And by being on the business side, I don't have to ingratiate myself with my partners. We're doing the ground up work of making projects happen. And that's a relief. And it helps me as I now go into my acting work. I will say one thing about all this self taping. It's personally, it's made me a better actor. Hate not being in the room with casting. That really so frustrating. Not be able to get a note in the moment, not having casting have a chance to really meet you, know who you are, see if you're sane or not. So I'm frustrated by all that, but the self taping has given me a lot of reps. Like in the last year, I've had a lot of reps just getting myself on tape. And I finally did a film this summer. I was in a film this summer with a star casting across from me. I had a really nice couple of scenes with star casting. And if I hadn't done all that self-tape work, I wouldn't have been ready.
Isn't that so wild too? Like, to your point, I had a client I was working with in voiceover for the last 2.5 years. The contract just ended, and the amount of work that we did, and it was fast and furious. I was telling my husband, I was like, thank God this came to me now. We're 3 years into COVID, because I know how to do this and I've been alone doing it. Like, my instrument has gotten stronger than I even realized. Where I'm like, I don't know if it was like back how it was before. I don't know if I'd have the endurance
Right.
in the way that I
Right.
do
That's
now.
that's yeah, endurance is a good word for it. Yeah. I
Yeah.
also, anyone listening to this, if someone's thinking about how to manage themselves, their time, I do recommend getting back into workshops as they seem useful. I get back into one particular room with a coach I love, probably 2 or 3 times a year, not that frequently, but enough to when I begin to feel my work going sideways a little bit,
They
like,
help pull you back.
yeah, yeah. Like I'm beginning to forget a little bit some craft issue, or I'm just not. If I felt myself begin to drift away from a certain level of honesty, I'll go back to the room, you know,
To
and
kind of reconnect with that.
yeah,
And
reconnect
yeah.
with others and myself.
Absolutely. And yeah, like, again, get out of me, like, get out of my own way almost, and to have that. There's this one voiceover casting director who's also a coach who I love, and same thing. Like, whenever I kind of feel, I'm like, "Ooh, I need Tina to come like rewrite the ship," and like have that reminder of the thing that I need to be connected to when I'm doing my auditions or anything like that.
And
And
isn't it really, really glorious to have someone who really knows you and knows your work?
yes. Oh, game changer.
Oh,
Game changer, where I trust her implicitly, and I'm like, "She is going to be candid," and she knows. She can spot it from a mile away.
and also, it's like I'm sometimes a little bit hesitant to go back into my room because it's a really good room. The other actors are really fine, and the level is pretty high. And I'm going in because I don't feel confident. And so I end up sometimes feeling shaken by my experience in the workshop because I'm like, oh God, I'm not nailing this the way my classmates are nailing it. But guess what? Then I go to set, and what happens is I end up getting this happened twice to me, 3 times, actually 3 times. I suddenly got praise from producers for my work. They really liked my work. The last movie I did, the comment was that my work was something like very focused but natural. That's it. My character definitely had a place in the world, a point of view, and a job to do, but I was also naturalistic. And I didn't overdo that. I was in a slightly bigger than a day player role. I think a lot of the actors, maybe they get for that level, they don't see that much level of training. So I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, look, because I'm in this room that, in which I feel outclassed 90% of the time, when I actually go to the job, I end up doing work that my employers appreciate.
And I think that's such a key ingredient, David, is finding the room where you feel outclassed. Like, finding, like, this Tina, the coach that I
Oh,
work with,
that's easy.
I know whenever I go there, I'm like, the people are great. Like, the people that she attracts are fantastic. And so, and it doesn't matter resume wise, like, it is, their talent is just next level. And it makes, I'm always a little nervous. And I've been doing voiceover for a decade, and I sweat. Like, I sweat in her classes because it's making me be forced to level up. And typically there are so many times in that room too where I'm like, I was not good. And that's kind of the point, right? I'm literally kind of going there to like stretch and shake it all out and to be exposed in that way. But that's also hard to do too. Like, I always, every time I'm going, I'm like, oh, tonight might be painful.
I struggle that. I struggle. I want to be praised. I want to go in and have somebody pat me on the back and say, "Good job. You're a good little actor. You're a good little
Yes.
professional actor."
Yes.
And very good. Golf clap. But ultimately, that's not what's useful. What's useful
No.
is really falling on your face, I was going to say, but that's only useful if you're really willing to get back up. And that's the key. And that's something I would like to tell somebody who's coming into the world of entertainment as a performer is to realize that most of it's failure. It's not just rejection. We hear all the time it's rejection, right? But also a lot of it's failure, 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 failure. It's artistic failure. It's career failure. It's networking failure. It's whatever it is. For me, it's often my own inability to get out of my own way failure. So what happens is if you just stick with it, you wind up eventually somewhere earlier or later doing work that you really appreciate because you failed so much, because you've actually acquired endurance. Your taste was probably pretty good to begin with, but you've acquired a skill to be able to begin to see your taste in action.
I think that's such a great pro tip for anybody who's wanting to pursue this career path or in the beginning where they're probably coming up against some of their first failures and is like, this is maybe harder than I thought it was going to be. You have a pro tip on your website, David, that you learned a way to make a living in film and TV is to earn an equity stake by being part of the originating creative or financial team, as residuals alone probably won't buy you a house. I love this pro tip. And I am so curious, how did you learn about this strategy? And if people are listening and are like, that sounds cool, I have no idea how to do that. How do people even get into that if they're curious about what that looks like?
Yeah. Well, it took me a decade of already being aware that I had to do something differently, but not quite having gotten over my old school idea that the way you make it as an actor is you're discovered at the soda shop, more or
Yes.
less,
The
right?
mall, yeah.
Yeah, you go and you do your work and you earn sweat equity that is rewarded. You do well in one job, then you get more jobs. A little bit of that happens for people, but this is a freelance world. This is not a world of linear progression, from one job to the next. So I've been realizing for a while I had to figure that out. There's a mismatch between my idea of myself as an actor and what was actually getting hired. Okay. So I was being hired for something that, I think I saw myself as, the leading man. Ha ha ha. I think that's what I saw myself as. And then I end up getting hired for freaking Malvolio, or Henry IV, and begin to realize, oh, I'm getting hired for authority figures and these guys that stick up their butt. And how do I make that work? So that was one early domino. And then going to workshops, I just began to pick up, I heard people talking about their projects, and I also was reading the trades and beginning to just sort of absorb osmosis what you need to do. One thing that was in my way too is I have a little bit of personal inherited money that I was really reluctant to use because it felt to me like it was cheating. I'm not the child of stars, but it was kind of felt like what's the phrase we use for that for a
Nepo
child?
babies?
Yeah, right, right. It felt like being a kind of a nepo baby,
Nepotism. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Totally.
And I was like, ugh, and people are going to not like me for that, and yada yada. And that was in my way for a really long time. So even I got to the point where I really realized, okay, I'm only getting on TV once every couple of years. Theater is not enough to live on. So finally, my desire to do work outweighed my embarrassment and how I got there. So I was like, fucky fuck. So here I am in a very public facing, role in the world. I don't want people to know I have this kind of help. But guess what? Even more, I want to do work just regardless of what people know about me, regardless of what they think about me. And that decision, I was creeping up to it. And I finally was able to go over the line when a non-acting friend, a scuba diving friend, a friend from my scuba world said, hey, I've got a buddy who's making films in North Carolina. You should talk to him. I was like, what's his phone number? I was literally on the phone like the next day. Within a week, and this guy was like, yeah, I'm trying to make a movie right now. I'm raising funds. I was down on his studio lot in North Carolina within a week. And, I met him over a Sunday breakfast with his grandchildren and his fiance at the time. And it was scary. It was really, really scary. I put some money in this film he was making, not my kind of movie. It's a faith-based film. I'm an atheist, but it was a faith-based film. The film does not promote any values that I'm not on board with, right? It's more actually faith-based is too strong. It's more of a ultimately spiritually oriented film. Let's call it that. But it's something that an atheist like me can get behind. And that was a huge learning experience. Meanwhile, that's on track A. On track B, a buddy I had met, a younger friend I had met in a one-on-one acting workshop a decade ago. He liked my work. We were there seeing a casting director from CBS. I remember that. And he liked what I did. And so he introduced himself, Chris McNeil. And then Chris and I became buddies. And Chris is an aspiring director and actor, and he's very talented. But he realized earlier than I did, because he's really smart. Chris has got a great brain. He realized early that the way in was to figure out the business end and to figure out financing. So Chris, he directed some commercials, he did a little bit of acting, but he also began to chip away in understanding film financing. So eventually, he and I are still talking. We're trying to find ways forward. We have a couple of film ideas. At one point, I had the idea, still like to do it one day. I would love to put The Winter's Tale on film. Shakespeare. It's the reason no one's done it though. So, and then we had a horror movie. We had a little dark thriller that we wanted to do, and we worked on that together to try and figure it out. Ended up falling apart. We would kind of like work on little projects, trying to figure them out. He and I would do that together with a little team of people, and then he was still trying to figure out financing. And eventually, he figured it out, and he made relationships, and he and I are working with a couple of those relationships are really important to us now. We help finance a Jeremy Piven thriller called Past Life that just opened in the UK. We are in a Dennis Haysbert, Marilu Henner, Joe Pantoliano, Joy Pants movie called Higher Love with producer Pierre Romain. So he and I have been figuring this out together. He's been knowing more of the figuring out than I have, I'll be honest. He's got a very fine-toothed understanding of what we're into. And so what we're doing, he and I together, in our partnership, we're making partnerships with others, with a kind of a small number of others. And I've got a partnership in North Carolina through which we're building out a relatively small 2 or 3 different teams of trusted colleagues. So I'm hoping to go forward, mostly making movies with these people, or TV too. My wife, Christy Veter, turned out to be a fine screenwriter, and she's written a couple of TV shows, which are fabulous, that we're hoping to get out there too.
I did look up your wife when I was researching you, and I saw like 30-minute comedies, her thing. And I was like, we need more of that. Like, I'm missing some of those like good comedies. And I love a good dramedy. I feel like now we're blending those two dramas so heavily where like, yeah, I'm just the traditional like 30-minute comedy. I'm like, ooh. So I saw that that's like her thing that she
doesn't do sitcoms. She still does single
totally
camera,
okay.
But yeah.
I love single camera is my thing. But you know what I mean? Like, think about, I don't know, like, this is the one example I'm thinking of now, like The Office, right? Like, The Office has very heartwarming, touching moments, but like, it's a comedy, where I feel like now there's so much. I was a guest star on a show that I loved called Sorry for Your Loss, that Elizabeth Olsen was the lead on, was a producer on. To me, it was like a 30-minute drama. But they tried to do the whole dramedy thing. Such a great show. It's on Facebook Watch, which I don't even think Facebook Watch is a thing anymore, but you can still find them. So yeah, I feel like I'm just craving like the good comedy that has like touches on heartwarming things that might not be funny, but like we're getting to explore them in a comedic sense. So I saw that in like one of the bios that I read about her, and I was like, ooh, I love that. I was like, I'm so ready for that and craving that. And I find this fascinating, David. And I thank you for kind of breaking down the different facets or different lanes and how it's all coming together. I find it fascinating because I feel like when we hear of people doing that, we're hearing of like big celebrities, right? Like Brad Pitt produces all of his movies, or we hear of that. Or I feel like a lot of the people I know who are doing it on the independent circuit, there's such a split between like who's the actors and the creatives and who's like the money people. I feel like there's not sometimes a blend of.
I actually, at some point, I realized, well, what helped me finally get over the line into the business side of it was realizing, and this is why I wasn't going to film festivals. I was realizing that until you get to set, the most boring and often the most irritating person in the room is the actor, because the actor doesn't really have anything to offer yet. All they have is need. All they have is they want something from you. Unless you're a star who's actually part of creating something, from the ground up, unless you're Ferguson, I forget her first name, Silo, contributing creatively to the show, so she'd be able to sneak peek. Unless you're that, you're just waiting around for someone to hire you, give you lines, and pay you some money. And nobody really wants to be around someone who doesn't have something to contribute. So I was like, I don't want to be that guy. And I wasn't going to film festivals because I didn't want to be the guy kind of hanging around going, oh, yeah.
Yeah, I loved your movie. Can we grab coffee? And it's like that one-way exchange.
I've done that, but I don't like it. And
Same. No.
the transactional nature of our world is really tough on
Yes.
me. Yeah.
And you know what? They say that too, David. I mean, I feel like as I've taken more business courses and not even just acting specific or industry specific, they always say, like, when you're reaching out to someone, it's like, what can you offer them? Right. And I feel like that was always the hard part with acting, where you're like, this one thing that, like, again, it feels like you need something from them and like they really don't need something for you. So, like, contribution, like you're saying, it's like a very limited contribution.
Oh my God. I went to one of these like branding, marketing things for actors once. I wanted to shoot myself. See, one of the things that they were saying is like, yeah, you should, when you send your email or postcard, you should really offer something like a recipe. You should give them a recipe. And I was like, oh my God.
My nana's homemade
Transparent and awful.
ravioli. You're like, no, that is why. I mean, and I get it. They're trying to be creative, but like,
Yeah. Some casting director in town must have a whole filing cabinet of nothing but zucchini bread recipes.
yeah, right. I'm like, from like the 1,500 actors who, that is so funny, David. That is hysterical. I mean, points for creativity, but man, you're like, I refuse. I am not, I'm not doing that. I'm curious because you mentioned the movie that's coming out with Jeremy Piven. How has streaming affected your guys' strategy?
Okay, that's a good question. I can't give you a full answer to that just yet.
Totally fine.
Yeah, it's just because I don't know yet. So I put my first little bit of money into a film just before the pandemic, and then that show went down. We didn't get to do it for a long time. So that's just going to go to market in the next few weeks. I have 4 films in which I have money, 3 of which I'm in as an actor, going to go to market and or open in 2026. So we're waiting to see. So what happened, but I just in general, just a typical answer. If the movie is something that can really merit a theatrical release in the theaters, that's what you aim for. You go for a theatrical release. It gets eyes on you. It gets you ticket sales. Typically, I think you make more money from ticket sales than you do from streaming. And then you're in the theater for whatever length of time the theaters are available or the film merits. Then it goes to streaming. So that's typically. I don't think any of the things we are doing now we're thinking about as going directly to streaming. They're either going to have a relatively wide theatrical opening or a small one. But that is still something to kind of figure out. Get back to me in a few months.
I was going to say, we'll do this again in a year, like, and we'll be able to talk about it because I'm curious because I know that that's changing a lot of the landscape of what people are strategizing when they're making films. It's something I've heard along the way because you mentioned faith-based and you also mentioned like a horror movie. I know classically
the 2 genres who are doing best right now. Yeah.
I was going to say, and I remember hearing that even a decade ago, but it's the 2 genres that they say still get people into the theaters where like you can have a cast that is not that known and people will still show up and pay for it.
Though, yes, that's true. Yeah, it's true. By the way, it's funny though. So Chris and I are really risk averse. We do everything we can to mitigate our risks.
Smart business wise, right?
Yeah. On one of our films, for instance, if the film doesn't do well, we're still inoculated because the tax credit is going to go to us if we needed to. That's in our deal. That happened to be unique for that project. That worked out for everybody. We don't have that on other movies. Yeah, but on one movie we have that. And in other films, we worked really hard to both share the risk between us, Chris and I, and to structure the deal as favorably as possible. Part of mitigating the risk, you know this already, we're going to say it out loud, it feels dirty, you have to have stars. And now Portland, Oregon filmmakers, I think, have done less well than their work often merits because they are banking on just doing an interesting movie with less well-known names. And I think it's hurting some people. I'm a little afraid of that. I'm not putting money into things I actually can afford to lose, which is not a good idea, by the way, though that gets me to another part of how we're mitigating. So anyway, so we're making films that do have stars. So Past Life has Jeremy Piven and Tim McInerney and Ian oh, I'm going to go, I'm forgetting how to say his name, and you'll look him up, and then Higher Love as Dennis Haysbert, Mary Henner, Joey Pants. My film I'm making with Dean Jones in North Carolina called Another Life is Kevin Sorbo. And that's a film that has a pretty specific audience we think we can bank on. An audience that I believe we have served well. I think we have done right by that audience.
Yes. No, I find this fascinating, David. I mean, I could talk to you about this all day because you and I are both creatives. It does feel like a dirty word, but like it's true. Like I even find myself sometimes when I'm, you know, flipping through the million different streaming services that we have to be like, what do I want to watch? And like there is sometimes a pull where I'm like, oh my God, I loved them in XYZ TV show. I'm like more bought into this new show that they have or whatever the case may be. So I get it. It is like a factor of how this business is always operated and needs to. And like you said, from that business side, risk management is a huge port. I mean, my husband owns a couple of different businesses, and whenever they're restructuring or pitching different things, like that's part of it is being like, okay, so when all these things can happen that are out of our control, like how do we make sure we are prepared for, prepared for the risk and trying to create the least amount of risk as possible?
One way, that Chris and I are going to mitigate our risk going forward, he's working on a platform for, let's call it just for shorthand for right now, because it's not quite right. Yeah, I'm going to call it crowdfunding, a model in which fans and, movie lovers get to actually invest in film through an online portal. My brilliant friend, Chris, is currently working on getting that out the door. One of the things we're looking forward to is having a slate of films. And with a slate, you take more risk on something and less on another, right? So the whole thing ends up working together. And that's how studios work.
Yeah, not that this is a complete one for one comparison, but one of the many businesses my husband runs is in commercial real estate. And it reminds me of like syndication a little bit, right? Where there's many ways, like, investing in film, like where you can structure it where it can be enticing as an investment depending on. So yeah, he's in commercial real estate. So same thing though, like one building might have more risk, but they do a lot of value add stuff. So it's interesting. I'm curious. I'm like going to keep very close tabs on you guys because I'm like, and then we'll do this again in a year. And I'm like, you'll probably have such a different conversation because like you said, 3 movies are coming out in 2026 or slated to come out.
Yeah. Yeah. With me in them. Yeah. 2 of them, I got tiny little roles. One, I've got a big role.
No small roles, David. There's no such thing as a small role. No small actors, no small roles.
Well, one of the things though that's exciting for me. So you asked me at one point, give me some ideas to think about for this podcast, and one of the things you were wondering about was, how this past year changed for me. One of the ways in which things have changed is I feel like I've really gained the trust artistically of my colleagues, and I've had a chance now to kind of prove I can do what I can do. And that makes me hungry to do more of it going forward. So now I'm in a place, I was not here a year ago. Now I'm in a place where I'm like, okay, you know what? We're going to look for projects now that I actually can do, really strong supporting roles, really strong supporting leads. And that probably not leads because we need stars for those, right? That's one of the ways things have changed. Also, part of that is this is really fun. This is name droppy and braggy a little bit, but give me a break.
Yeah.
I've had a chance now to be on set with some main folks, and it's done a couple things for me. One, I've held my own, which is really cool to be able to do that. And number 2, I've now been on set with named folks, not in a TV show. It's different than a TV show, actually. I want to distinguish between doing a movie and doing TV. I've begun to see what it is that makes star actors stars. So when I'm doing a scene with Dennis Haysbert, who is President Palmer in the show 24, kind of before your time, frankly.
I know, but yes, a little bit before. But I know the 24 game for sure.
Totally fair.
Yeah.
People know him from the Allstate commercial, I think. Fine actor. So he and I are a 2-person scene. And, and I'm always kind of trying to learn, watching. And I'm realizing that he is just unselfconsciously just exuding being. He's exuding presence. And, we got crew around you. This is a small independent movie, so we've got to make our day or we're screwed. So there are pressures, but he, despite all that, in the midst of all that, was just able to just kind of just be in a way that I haven't really seen non-stars that frequently do. And I went, oh, and for a moment, I figured out how to do it. For a moment in that scene with him, I was like, oh, that's what, And, and that came out of being really prepared because I wasn't going to fuck this up. Right. I was two things. I was really prepared. And because I was prepared, I was able to let things go. I was just like,
Yeah, and be present, and, like, they always say that in class, right? It's like, do the homework, and then when you get in here, like, throw it out the window so we're not, like, watching the homework, we're
can't watch the
watching
homework.
y
Can't
totally.
watch the homework.
But yeah, that's so interesting. Elizabeth Olsen, getting to work with her on her TV show, I know what you mean when you just talked about that because watching her, and she was also a producer on the show, so getting to see her make creative decisions. But I know what you mean when you just describe that, where I'm like, it's something that it's almost like hard to describe because it feels like she's so present. It feels like frenetic. Yeah, and like you said, how you kind of, if you can, because of being prepared or like lock in with them, I'm getting chills thinking about it because I'm like, it's so cool. And then you getting to learn that and be able to experience that, like, what a gift.
Yeah, and it's something that is at least partially learnable, that is partially trainable. And for me, anybody who knows me as an actor will know that I've struggled with giving myself permission at times. And so I had a tiny little walk-on role basically in past life. We were shooting in Manchester, UK last winter. It was a day on set, so it was more than a walk-on, but it was kind of a dream sequence. I'm a surgeon, and it's very, not a lot of lines, just a lot of action. And well, this is funny. I was in this scene with just background actors, and I was the only actual actor in the scene. And we threw a couple lines to the background actors, and they had a hard time dealing with it. I had forgotten that that can be a thing, that people can be afraid. And so I ended up on set just riffing and ad-libbing and throwing in jokes and just like doing anything I can to get my people around me to react. And I gave myself permission in a way to do something that I know that, on TV and the kind of roles I've done so far, that get me fired.
For sure, for sure, yeah. They're like, "Do your job, hit your mark, and say the line." I'm like, "Let's
You
keep."
do what you did in the audition or we're going to be mad at you,
It's so cool. You're infusing your creativity into these different projects that you're getting a chance to create and starting from nothing come to life. You also have a podcast, and I can't wait to talk about it. Your podcast is called the Everyday Courage Podcast, real stories of overcoming fear and finding strength. I know starting a podcast is no small feat. It's not the same as making a movie, but it is, there's a lot that goes into it. And I know you're working with Michelle Simone Miller, who we mentioned earlier, and
She's the secret sauce. She's my secret weapon. Yeah.
she's the best of the best. Like, I absolutely adore her. I just had her on the podcast and she's just incredible. How did you get the idea of what specifically you wanted to have the podcast be about courage? And why was podcasting the medium that you chose?
Right. Well, the acute moment, so the impetus to do it came from the election of Donald Trump, which, where I am politically, it terrified me. I didn't know what disaster it was going to be, but I think we're seeing exactly what kind of disaster it's going to be, where the idea of America we've all grown up with is genuinely at risk right now. And I was looking at that. I didn't know what to do about it. And I felt paralyzed. And I do have a little bit of inherited money, which is really I need, is important to me. My businesses are funded that way, and it's how I pay my rent. So I didn't want to put any of that at risk. There's immediate impetus to just kind of like go into a shell, to keep safe, run off into hobbies, to just spend my time scuba diving. But I couldn't, what the fuck? I could not let myself do that. I didn't know what to do. And then it occurred to me, wait a minute, I'm not the only one feeling this way. A lot of us are really feeling afraid. But I didn't want to go at it directly. We did get political at times in our season one. I was trying to avoid being too explicitly political. I didn't want to turn some people off. So I thought, you know what? Why don't we talk to people about what courage looks like in their daily lives in ways that they don't expect, in ways which they may very well not recognize. So one of my best friend, Jackie Carlo, school psychologist and mom, we started the conversation and she claimed to not be a courageous person. She claimed not to see it. She claimed not to recognize it. I felt that, well, the idea of the experiment was maybe if we can begin to see how we're already being courageous in small and sometimes bigger ways, we can then begin to imagine ourselves as being courageous in bigger ways. So maybe the person who's not going to go out to No Kings, particularly rally, particularly when they think ice is out there. Maybe if they already realize it takes an awful lot of courage to get up in the morning and face their screaming kids, without losing their shit. Maybe if they realize, oh, they're already exercising some willfulness in a positive way, they'll be able to go out to No Kings, or they're willing to go vote. If we encourage somebody to not stay home on voting day because they're afraid, they say they want to stay home because they're afraid ICE is going to be a problem, or, at the voting booth, which looks like it's very possible. If we give somebody the courage, help them find the courage to actually go vote, we've been a success.
Absolutely.
Oh, we're going to do it. And by the way, my co-host is Stefan Dweck, a dear friend I've known for 25 years. And so it's been a great time. It's been great to hang out with him. And he's making kind of a good tag team. He's good at just being curious about people. And I take on the job of keeping us on track. What we do,
I was gonna say it's the perfect marriage
Yeah, right.
between you two because there needs to be that person to like rein us in and like be a little tasky, but like we also the curiosity I'm sure has made some conversations go in completely new ways that you weren't expecting. I love the concept of your podcast, and I just listened to the last episode with Michelle, which was fantastic. And what's so serendipitous about us having this conversation this week, David, is it says your podcast is an invitation to rethink what courage is in today's world. And I read that and I was like, I'm in. I'm so bought in. And I'm in grad school for clinical mental health counseling. And we're going through this short series, kind of at the first 30 minutes of class that my professor put together, talking about different values of a counselor. And the one that we discussed this week was courage. And we had to do all these different values exercises that we could potentially one day use with our clients. And one of them, out of like the 60 choices that we had, one of my main core 5 values was courage. And as we were kind of unpacking courage, my professor, as she was putting the lesson plan together, said her initial thought of what the definition of courage is to be afraid of something but choose to do it anyways. Like kind of that, like, you're going into battle and you're taking action in the face of fear. And as she was researching the different literature that she was researching to put this lesson plan together, she was shocked at how many different authors talked about courage being more about persistence, endurance, and resilience. And so in getting to do the first season of the show, what is your current definition of courage, and has it changed since starting the show?
I really like what your professor's saying. I'm not sure I had a definition of courage other than simply being willing to act when you're afraid to do so. This is how our season 1 changed me a little bit. Adding to your professor's thoughts about just endurance, sticking with something, I'd also throw in honesty is really important to courage. I think that courage without honesty about your project or about the conditions in which you're trying to do a project is either foolhardy, it turns into foolhardiness. It also can turn into something evil. It can turn into blinkered ideology. So for me, at least, I'm going to try to promulgate the idea. Courage requires being as honest as one possibly can be about the conditions around you over which you don't have any control and about which are not about you. So not everything is about us. It's about realizing, oh, wait a minute, there's something here I have to learn still. Maybe I don't have all the answers. Politically, we're definitely in that place where we all have to be kind of more honest. I mean, my least favorite people are hard-ass ideologues on either end of the political spectrum. I also don't really have a lot of respect for the mushy middle. So if you don't want to be in the mushy middle and you don't want to be on either end, what does that mean? It means you need to find a position which is authentically oneself and is tough-minded about that, while also being open to what other people have to say, new information.
Yeah, and be able to, I think, have that, again, curiosity in receiving it, not jump to a place of judgment or jump to a place of arguing for the sake of arguing, but having a curiosity of like, what can I possibly learn from you? Even if I don't agree with you, like, how can I grow from what it is that we're sharing? And as you were describing that, David, about honesty, that was the word that was coming up, was authentic. And you said it, like, that kept ringing in my head as you were talking about honesty, is like that courage to be so intimately connected to your authenticity, and then the courage to like not be afraid to share that and expose that.
Right. And to also, while at the same time, making it not about you. There's a paradox, right? I love going through actor reels on Instagram. And David Lynch talks about the importance of intuition in artistic work. And he says intuition is not merely instinct, and it's not merely ratiocination. It's not merely cognition. It's a combination of both. And intuition is cultivating one's intuition by remaining honest, I think is really important. And it's something I'd say to young actors coming to the field.
I'm so excited for any actor who's been in the game a long time or a young actor to listen to this conversation, because I feel like you've just provided such a wealth of not only knowledge and wisdom, but like really good food for thought. Like I'm sitting here listening to you and I feel like my brain is buzzing in such a positive way in all these different directions of just things that, and again, not even just my head, like my heart too. I feel like I'm very overwhelmed in a positive way. It's like when you get inspired and you're like, what am I going to do with this for the rest of the day? Like I feel like I want to take action with it. And so thank you, David, because this has been
thank you.
So great. And we're in our last couple questions. I call them rapid fire-ish.
Okay. Good luck with me.
Same. That's why I preface with that, because I'm like, I am, very long-winded. So last couple questions, rapid fire-ish. What's the messiest thing about you?
That I still self-denigrate. That when I get really insecure and afraid, and I lose heart, like as we all do, and I end up being self-denigrating, which I've learned serves nobody. It does not only hurt me, it hurts the people I work with. So I can't afford to do it.
That reminds me of a quote I saw on Instagram about kind of the whole, like, if being really hard on yourself or being like mean to yourself worked by, like, if it worked, like, wouldn't it have worked by now? And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, maybe this isn't the best way forward. Maybe this is not helping me right now. And I appreciate you sharing that, David, because I think, I don't mean to generalize this. I think just out of conversations I've had with female actresses recently, we almost think we'll arrive at a point where that doesn't happen anymore. Like where we're finally confident enough, or we are so trusting in our capabilities or whatever the case may be. And I think that that's not true. It's more we recover faster than I think we maybe did in the beginning.
I think there's some truth to that. Yeah.
Yeah. What are you the most excited about right now, personally or professionally?
Well, I'm excited to actually have work going out into the world. And it's not the work that I necessarily saw myself doing, but it's work. And I've learned, that's really important to people who may want to work with you down the road. They just want to see that you did something. They want to see that you followed through with it, that you got it done, that you were a team player, that you were good to work with, that all that stuff, so the product, you don't have all that much control of all the time, but you do have control over whether or not you get it out there. So that I'm genuinely excited about finally getting some work out there. I mean, some money come home to me. And also having done work on camera that in the last couple of years that others trust, I'm now beginning to see the opening for doing bigger roles in film. So more is going to become available to me because of the work I've already done. That's not happened in television as much. Television has been really, really hard to make tracks. I can't tell you how many auditions or pins I've had for good, juicy roles that have come up that I've done well on, I've gotten good feedback on, that I was clearly capable of doing it. But the needs for TV are a lot stricter than they are for film in a way. It's just probably the wrong word, but it's more of a formula.
I agree. And I think a very long time ago, when I first moved to LA, I was having a million side hustles, and one of them was nannying, and my boss was a showrunner. And getting to witness her in that role, and she had a writing partner, and seeing not only the creative decisions they had to make, but the business decisions they had to make, it gave me a lot more empathy is the wrong word, but I was like, oh shit, okay, like this machine of TV is intense. And like you said, maybe stricter. There's so much going on. So many people making decisions, so many restrictions that have to be followed. I think some of that might be changing a little bit with streaming. This was like, maybe Netflix was around back then, but like that was probably the only streaming service. And so it gave me a little bit of a window to be like, oh shit.
Well, my TV experience as an actor has been in tiny roles on big shows, procedural like The Blacklist, or a huge cast show like Wu-Tang, or a soap opera like The Oval. So those are just gigantic machines that cannot stop. They cannot stop for you. Can I throw something out? Because it's just praying in the back of my mind. You talk about, what do I want to say to a younger person coming into this field? Couple things. One, nothing you ever do is wasted. is one reason why I really decided to stick with the arts or this art, because everything I've done in my life is mulch for growing my art. My failures, more than anything else, actually, my heartbreaks and failures are super, super important. My failed attempts at other careers, which are really important. So there's that. And there's also the thing about pivoting from one possible career path to another is that if in each time you pivot, and I've done it a few times, you are following a genuine curiosity, genuine sense of curiosity. Everything you do is going to end up expressing a need that you may not be able to articulate yet. So you might go into the world and you think, I want to be an actor. I need to become an actor. I'm going to be an actor. But for whatever reason, that's a little tougher than it looks. And eventually a possible pivot comes up and you get a chance to ask yourself, oh, is it being an actor, or is it being an actor expressing something else, expressing a deeper need that I don't quite know how to articulate just yet, that is expressible elsewhere? So for me, journalism, photography, philosophy, acting, and producing, it's all the same thing. It's all expressing this same irrepressible need to discover something. I can't quite tell you what it is. And that's part of what I want to say is that this is what I've been learning for myself, and I would love to see it in others. That is, knowing what we want is not obvious. And by the way, we may never know what we actually really want. We think we want to achieve such and such a goal. I want to become a famous actor, or I want to be a great business person, whatever. So often, those discrete goals are actually masks for what we really want. That so often, those goals are ways of avoiding a confrontation with something scarier for ourselves. So it may turn out that, maybe what I thought was a need for attention was a need for a certain kind of experience. So that's something I'm discovering for myself, and I think I'd like to share with others.
I think that's brilliant, David. And what it's making me think of is I work with this awesome mindset coach, Amy Austin. And in the past, probably 2 years ago, I was describing this need, this intangible need. I could not put my finger on it. And I was kind of like, if we're talking about lanes, it's like I've got Maddie the actor lane, Maddie, I have all these different lanes. And I was like, there's this other lane, and I cannot put my finger on what it is. And I was so desperate for clarity. And I kept saying it felt like everything was misty around me. I didn't feel scared, but I was like, I can't see forward. I can see a little bit forward, but then it's foggy. I can't see past it. And ultimately, it became about starting to explore and try different things and take different actions to start being like, that's warmer. I'm warmer if I go over there. Or wow, I thought maybe it was this. And what's so interesting is since her and I kind of having that conversation and exploring that, there's been so much I've discovered about myself. And it's part of why I went back to grad school, and that was not on my bingo card. And there's still not it still is foggy. There's still not that tangible thing. I don't know what it is. I cannot put it into a word or a phrase, but I'm like, wow, what I've been able to discover, uncover, have some curiosity, and make some pivots and make some decisions with that has been so fulfilling and freeing. So I just connected so deeply to what you said from my own personal experience the last couple of years. And that, I think, that takes a lot of courage to be
Yeah,
open to that,
I
because
agree with you.
especially young actors, I feel like when I first came into the industry, there was this notion of don't have a plan B. If you have a plan, that's how they would pitch it to us, right? It's you have to if you want to do anything else, that's not the place for you. And I feel like it freaks a lot of people out for even exploring some of those other things that are coming up for them, if it doesn't fall into the perfect umbrella of being an actor. But like you said, all of those different roles that you had of being a journalist, being a philosopher, it was this connected through line to also the David who's an actor, and that want and need to express.
And as artists, every time we name something, every time we name a part of the great shared experience through our art, every time we do that, we are actually also throwing back into the shadow of something else is unnamed. So we never get to name anything without relegating something else to mystery, which means our job is never, ever done. It's never done because there's always a mystery, just a new mystery that's been created. Hey, I said a couple of times, this is what I want to tell younger actors. I learn a ton from younger actors, and I learned to be humble around younger actors. Not only is it just incredible fucking talent out there that I just like every new wave of, conservatory grad is like, oh shit. These they're just amazing, just talent wise, but also very sharp business people. So I just, everything I've talked about, I've told you what I have learned in the last decade, 15 years of my life that I learned late. And I do see younger people, do see younger actors, particularly in film, TV, theater, maybe a little less often, being very smart about the business and picking up on, what they need to do. I love to tell people about my version of the actor's nightmare. So for the longest time, I had just had the actor's nightmare that we all know. We go out there on stage and you don't know your lines and you're like, oh my God, you might be naked. Who
Panicking.
knows what's going
Yes,
on?
totally.
Eventually, my actor's nightmare changed. And one night, I found myself dreaming. I walked out on stage. I didn't know my lines. And I was like, wait a minute. I turned to my scene partner and said, what play is this? And they're like, I don't know. I was like, okay, let's just do it then. So we just like, okay, that's been one version. Another version has been go out there and says, okay, so we know what play we're doing, right? But we don't know our lines. All right, we know the story. Let's just do it.
You're like, we don't even know what play we're in, but we have a stage, so we're gonna use it. David, you've been so awesome. This has been
Oh,
so
thank you
much
for
fun.
that.
Yeah,
You're a
absolutely.
wonderful host. You're very welcoming. You're very
Thank
warm. Thank
you.
you.
I appreciate that. And I'm gonna put everything in the show notes, but can you tell people where they can come hang out with you and get more of your awesomeness? Socials, your podcast?
Very kind. I would love if people would find us at Everyday Courage, which is on, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You Google us every day, separate those words. There's another podcast out there which is Everyday one word. So we're Everyday Courage with David Millstone and Stefan Dweck. Everyday Courage and Millstone will probably get you to the right place. Our season 1 was a little rough around the edges, but I think we're maybe charming because of it. Also, we're going to do a season 2 where I'm specifically going to have on guests who are doing work to save our democracy in
Amazing.
very direct work, but work in ways we may not recognize as being direct. For instance, my brother is a real estate developer. He's working on making and using new construction techniques to create affordable but attractive housing.
Which we
And
need
which
desperately.
is maybe one of the reasons why we are where we are, our lack of
Yeah,
housing. So I'm going to have another
absolutely.
guest on from Southern Poverty Law Center. So I hope people will find us there. I have a website, davidmillstone.com. I'm on social media. I get a little prickly. I really try hard on social media to stay open to everybody. I don't always succeed, but I
It's
am on
not an easy
Facebook and
task.
Threads.
It's not an easy task, you know what I mean? But David, this has been such a pleasure. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so much,
much.
Maddie. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
very
much.
much.
You're the real hero if you've made it this far. Thanks so much for hanging out today, and check out the show notes for any resources or cool info mentioned in today's episode, or places to follow along if you want to hang out some more. I'm rooting for you today and always. Stay messy.